Being from the South, I know a thing or two about how bugs can ruin a great outdoor experience. It's crazy how something so small can affect some of the potentially greatest experiences of your life. And that's why today's show is brought to you in part by Sawyer. You might know them as the water filter company. I actually have a couple Sawyer filters, but they make a lot of other great products too, including their insect repellent. And just some points about what it is. It's great for the whole family. It's actually safe to use on infants and those who are pregnant because they don't use DEET, the active ingredient. They use something better called picaridin. It actually lasts longer. It lasts up to 12 hours. Pretty incredible. And it doesn't damage any of your gear. So it's insect repellent specifically made for families who are also outdoorsy because it won't ruin any of that high dollar gear that you've bought to be out there. And it does a fantastic job of protecting you and your family from those vector-borne illnesses that are carried by insects. I know for me, I'm always carrying some insect repellent because I've had mosquitoes specifically ruin some pretty incredible backpacking experiences. Don't let it happen to you. Use Sawyer's 20% picaridin insect repellents. Find out more about that at sawyer.com. Play safe, travel safely. Sawyer. They keep you outdoors.
Like how miserable it is. And I think that's when you ask, like, how I've learned to push through this, like where I grew up and where I train, it just kind of embodies that. You can say miserable, but to a point when you get used to that, that's the norm. And so when you're confronted with these hard things, it ends up being the norm. And you learn a passion to kind of enjoying that pain and suffering.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, where we hear stories of adventure from every corner of the planet. We interview all sorts of folks who are using their sport to explore the world around them and give you the inspiration you need to get out there and have some fun. Hey, Adventure Sports Podcast listeners. Thank you for joining. Today's episode is another crossover from my other show, Without Compromise. It's just another one of the episodes that I felt would make a great episode for here, so that we don't have to do a revisited episode today. And today's episode is with Ryan Kempson. He's an endurance athlete, an obstacle course racing athlete, a coach. Very cool guy. He's one of Athletic Brewing's talents, one of our athletes. So we will be talking about that a little bit. If you don't know, I work at Athletic Brewing as my day job, and which I'm very thankful for. I've been there about a year now, and they actually found me through this podcast. So I talk about them so much, one, because I work there, two, because I'm so incredibly thankful for the opportunity to work there and continue doing this show. When they brought me on, one of the first things they said was, hey, just so you know, we want you to keep doing the Adventure Sports Podcast because that's how we originally found you. And that's, there's a lot of folks listening out there that get a lot from this show. So that's where it all comes from, that crossover. So anyway, Ryan's one of those athletes for Athletic, and we're going to be talking to him today about, how he does what he does, how he's transitioned. A lot of us have transitioned recently, maybe from ball sports or team sports or events even, to totally outdoor adventures. One, because we have to, and two, because, with social distancing and all that is what I mean. And two, because maybe there are things that we wanted to get around to out in the outdoors that we just didn't have time for, didn't have a good reason to. Well, now we have a reason. We have a very good reason to make sure we get out there and do that. And if you were already out there in the outdoors, you already know the benefit. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Ryan Kempson, hear a little bit about his story and what he does. And have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. All right, folks, welcome to Without Compromise. Great episode today. Someone who's been in the athletic community for quite a while, Ryan Kempson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mason. Appreciate it. Glad to be on.
Awesome, man. So we were talking a little bit before, but I'd love to kind of revisit it. Where did you end up growing up? What did you end up, what were you doing growing up? Were you always this athletic and adventurous, or did you kind of have to discover it on your own?
I grew up in the woods in Vermont, basically. Yeah, if anybody's familiar with Vermont, I grew up in Woodstock, about just a few miles from the big ski mountain, Killington. And, typical childhood in the woods. I went out building forts, mountain bike, and grew up with my brother. And, basically we're outside until my mom has one of those crazy mom whistles where she puts her fingers in her mouth and you can hear it, miles away. And, it was dinner time and she would call us in. And, that's, I played ball sports growing up, but, the foundation of my athletic abilities just came from being outside all day and doing just a multitude of different sports. And that just kind of refined me into, even though I went through ball sports through high school and college, that lifestyle growing up just kind of refined who I am today.
That's really cool to hear, man. I'll be honest. I was expecting, no, I wasn't involved in that stuff, and I had to go find it myself. I just hear that a lot, I guess. So to
Yeah,
hear from
yeah.
someone who, grew up out in the woods on some land, I know exactly what you're talking about with that mom whistle, man. It's like amazing how those can be.
It's unreal. Just cuts through you. It's like a dog whistle to a dog. Just you perk up real quick and you know where to.
Oh man,
Uh,
that's hilarious. So it's probably safe to say you're pretty comfortable out there in the woods doing some of these adventures, especially of late, some of these kind of more solo trips.
yeah, and it's funny. Even though I grew up in the woods, I was never your so-called endurance sport. I never ran for school. I never did track. Never did cross country. So even though this was like it's kind of how I grew up as far as having that athletic background. When I started getting into the Spartan races and the trail running, I wasn't. It took a lot of work to build that endurance space, but it's still, when you get into these longer, tougher adventures and things that take some grit and a lot of the technical running up in the Northeast, that just came very natural to me. It wasn't a challenge. I just had to kind of learn how to do it for longer durations.
Yeah, and I actually saw that you recently hit a milestone of 18.2 miles as your longest run ever. Like, this was a couple months ago, but for someone who's known for endurance sports and obviously a professional, that's
Hmm.
not very far. So that's kind of interesting to because you just mentioned how this wasn't your background, but you're still able to do so well at a lot of these events on the shorter side.
Yeah, it's that's the cool thing about Spartan Racing is I think it can be a bridge for someone who's a regular athlete into the endurance world. And a lot of the athletes may come from the other way. They might be in the endurance world, and it's almost a bridge for them to get into more of an athletic realm. But yeah, that was a bridge for me, and it got me intrigued and a little bit more stoked on kind of going after these big adventures. And I think maybe COVID was a blessing for me because it gave me time to kind of get away from what I've been doing professionally for the past few years and explore some new adventures.
Mm. I think, man, if you can look at it that way, that's it is an opportunity for a lot of folks. And so I'm glad you're seeing it that way. But to kind of go back, you said you had a background in ball sports, and I know you played college basketball. And honestly, how many NBA players have run all that far? So that kind of makes sense too. I bet LeBron hasn't run a marathon in his life. Maybe he has. I don't know, but you just don't. It's kind of interesting. Some of the best athletes in the world might not have ever run that far, but for you, in the ball sports, specifically basketball, when did you do that first Spartan race or that first OCR race, and what did it light in you? Did you immediately see some sort of connection there and start pursuing it, or did it take some
Um,
time?
my brother and I got into it early on. Like, I think our first actual one is like in 2012, and it really was just he was living in Colorado at the time. I was in the East Coast in Massachusetts, and it was a way for us to kind of get together and do something fun. And he actually took it. He got kind of caught the bug right away and started training for it. And it took me a few years. I was still starting up a coaching business at the time. I don't know. I didn't catch the fever right away, and it wasn't until like 2014 or 15 that I think after I did a couple, it it wasn't because I loved the Spartan races or any of the OCR races. It was because it just was a challenge. And I think not coming from endurance sports, being confronted and not actually being really, really good at something, it was tough, especially after, went through my whole life of being a decent basketball and football player and playing some college basketball, having success, and then basically almost starting from ground zero. And that challenge, that really spurred the interest to me. And I think what, besides, I started, anything you do, if you're good at something, you're going to be attracted to that. So I started finding some success, but when you do a Spartan race, you don't do Spartan races every day. Like, you don't train a Spartan race to do a Spartan race. You go on big mountain runs, or you cross train, you lift weights, or for me, I kite surf or bike. So the training to do it's really fun, and it's a challenge. It's, you put something on the board, and I know not just the race, but the competition is at such a high level now that it becomes, it's just something you want to push yourself and, build up all this fitness with activities you love doing, and then just kind of unleash it during a competition, just find out what you've done and all that training. And I think that challenge aspect of it is why I love, which is so different than most endurance sports, because most endurance sports, whether it's cycling or, a marathon runner, all you do is you cycle. All you do is run on the road. And because it's such a one specific skill. And in the Spartan races, you have to be a well-rounded athlete. You can't just be really good at one thing. You got to be pretty darn good at everything. And that's what I think was, attracted me and has kept me around for so long.
And it makes sense with basketball. And I'll just be honest, that's my sport too, a sport of choice.
Yeah.
Love the game, and there's always something to work on, whether it's handles or shooting or pass. I mean, there's literally dozens and dozens of compartments to always be working on in a game like that. And for this, you're totally, even triathlons, I mean, it's literally 3 big buckets, so it's like, even at that point, it's manageable. But for this, you're right, it is tons of cross training, and I'm sure that background gave you some advantage there.
Yeah, and I guess a touch on that is, basketball really was my true love. Like, I still love it. And, I coach athletes as far as like fitness goes, but I also ran like an AAU, like a club basketball team for 5 years. And that was my passion. That's what I loved. And really it transitioned into, doing this endurance stuff professionally and having my performance kind of skyrocket was, I got to a point about 2 years ago that I finally accepted that basketball was, that was the first part of my life, and I let that go. And I transitioned to this kind of more kind of love for the outdoors as I grew up. And that was really hard for me to do. I mean, when you love something for, at that point I'd been playing basketball for 15 years of my life, and to decide like, no, you're not going to continue to pursue that even through coaching, and to jump on board at something else. That was, it was really tough, but I'm so glad I made that jump.
Did you feel like it was something you had to do?
I think like I passed my basketball team onto another coach who took over operations, and it was something I had to do. I think, even though I wasn't playing anymore, coaching, I was still holding on to like that just dream of like living a life of basketball, and I had to pass it off. And as soon as I passed it off, it wasn't a weight off my shoulders, but it just allowed me to put all my effort into a new passion and a new love, and just to move on to something else that gives me a lot of stoke and has become the really what I strive to do every day.
That makes a lot of sense, man. So yeah, that sounds hard. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow. So and I also know that just a handful of years ago, about 5 years ago or so, you were dealing with a pretty serious hip injury. Yeah, I know you've mentioned that a few times. I don't know if you're just tired of talking about that.
No, it's just
it seems very pivotal in your life.
People ask, my journey, my process, and it was just such a, just this web of things that happened, with the basketball and I started training for these races seriously with my brother around 2014 and found out I had a pre-existing, pretty serious labral tear on my hip. That was probably from childhood or college playing basketball. And so I had surgery, and that alone, the recovery it takes a while. And it's funny because if someone told me, and the thing is, I think what kept me going is I believed I could compete with the best in the circuit and the sport. So that was always in the back of my mind. But if someone were to tell me, hey, you're going to get into the sport, you're going to have surgery, and it's going to take you 4 to 5 years to get to where you believe you could be, I don't know if I would have signed up for that again. Yeah. It's looking back, it's kind of the time has flown by. But for whatever reason, I've been able to keep, the focus going in one direction, even as the sport, as the sport has grown. And it's been kind of wild, and there's no regrets. The process has been up and down, and it's been hard, but I'm really happy where I'm at now. I'm really enjoying life, and I'm enjoying the process of training, not just the sport itself. And I think that's what I'm super stoked about, is that every day I go out and go on these awesome adventures, and the training isn't a grind. It's what I love to do every day.
That's a blessing, man, to enjoy the process, because when you don't, and you just got your mind set on that end goal, it's it can be a pretty miserable long go of it before you get to that. You probably aren't going to make it to the end.
Yeah, I think that was probably the hardest thing having a hip surgery is, I guess you got hit right on it, is like just having my life literally compromised. Like I couldn't go out and run 3 miles with my brother or even a longer run in the mountains. I couldn't do the things that I not only needed to do for training, but I wanted to do. And that was very frustrating. I mean, it's just everything was kind of taken away. And now that I'm healthy, just literally, the whole concept with athletic brewing is, living a life without compromise, and just how I feel every single day. I'm just able to go out and do the things that I love, without compromising anything. Even if that's, I've chose to do this as a full-time profession, not compromising, having to sit in an office all day or having to do something I don't want to do. I've been able to, through this process, choose something that I absolutely love to do. And every day is just a blast.
Every day is a blast. That's a great place to be in life.
Yeah.
So do you think dealing with that and dealing with these, just like in a Spartan race, these huge obstacles, do you think that's made you, just a more relatable or better coach as well? Because for folks that don't know, you're a trainer and a coach as well.
Yeah, with the coaching and it's being an athlete helps you relate to the athletes themselves. Especially, I work with a lot of, especially in the Cape, a lot of baseball players. I coach, runners and OCR athletes, but in person, I work with a lot of, baseball players. Kids are coming up, they're trying to play high level in college, or even, go to be drafted in the pros. And it's, I've always taken, because I'm a trainer, we work on the fitness performance side, but I also have coached basketball. And coaching, I think that term is thrown around a little bit too loosely nowadays, and people forget, like, there's a huge psychological component to it and a mentoring component. And, the fact that I put my body through, the rigors of training and understand, what it takes, it allows me to communicate and connect with these kids who are trying to do the same thing. And, we can understand one another a lot better, and I can, help be a mentor for them. And it's not about just telling them what exercise to do or what to eat or, how to sleep. It's, just talking to them, through the process of how to approach things, both physically and mentally, and, how to take on the situations that they're going to confront, whether it's in training or, sometimes, how to live their life, what to do, what not to do. And it's that process is very rewarding in order to be able to share that with, a young kid, because the reason why I got into coaching is when I was a kid in Vermont, I had some good coaches. I had some great coaches for basketball growing up, a phenomenal football coach. But, they're kind of your prototypical coaches from 10 or 15 years ago, is that they're amazing and great disciplinarians, but I might not have had the ability to, connect with them, and really have maybe a closer relationship. And, that's what I try to provide to the kids I work with is, it's not necessarily, like your buddy friends, but it is a friendship and it's a relationship that they can reach out to me if they need something or need some advice, or, they're having a hard time and something with school, and they can give me a call and just talk through it. And that's, I think that's really what a coach should be to, especially a young kid, is, a mentor that they can look to for advice and, help them grow as a person and an athlete.
When you first start building something like a podcast or a brand or anything that, e-commerce where you could sell things online, the funny thing is, even when it's something you're passionate about, you need to have the business savvy as well, and you need to have the right tools in place to actually make it work. And so that's why I actually use Klaviyo, not only for my day job, but for this podcast as well, for my e-commerce marketing platform. It's everything from branded emails to text messages to so much more. And it's all super memorable, super impactful, very robust. And it has, all sorts of automation features, very powerful insights, which is really helpful, and super precise targeting. So Klaviyo is essentially a faster way to turn a great idea into a great customer experience. And the proof is in the pudding. It's trusted by over 40,000 brands, including this podcast and my day job. In fact, the average Klaviyo user sees a 41% increase in overall revenue within 5 months. And it also scales, so no matter how big you get, Klaviyo can also grow with you. So if you want to learn more about how you can grow your brand with online e-commerce marketing, go to klaviyo.com/grow and try for free today. That's KLAVIO.com/grow.
I didn't realize you were doing that as well, the mentoring side. And I'll say, the coaches that made the biggest impact on me were the ones that left me wanting more time with them, left me wanting to spend more time learning from them and just talking with them about anything, life, the sport itself. So that's really interesting. How do you ensure that you stay, filled with wisdom and perspective and just being full so that you can kind of pour out into these students and these athletes that you coach and mentor?
I think it just comes down to, being me. Again, I think a lot of coaches try to be someone they're not. And, I don't reach out and I don't do all this marketing for coaching. It's all word of mouth, and the kids that want to work with me, it becomes a good relationship. And that's the first thing I tell any kid or any parent who's interested in coaching or training is that, hey, this may or may not be a good relationship. Let's take, a month or two, see how it goes. And if it fits, let's keep the ball rolling. But if not, there's plenty of coaches out there, and each athlete needs a coach that's the proper fit for them. And it needs to be a great relationship where there's we're working together towards a common goal. And then it just, that way it always seems to fit and it falls into place, how it's supposed to.
So you've got this kind of balance between running that, between doing, being a Spartan athlete, working on your own personal connections and stuff, training yourself. What does a typical day look like for you? Is there a typical day, or could you average it out somehow? Because it sounds like such a mix.
I would love to say I get up at 4:30 a.m. I eat my breakfast. I go for a run. I get on the computer. I do my computer work. I work with athletes. I do this, and I go, But no, it's fortunate enough to not have a place of, I don't have to go into work. So, my day varies all the time. Sometimes I'm staying with my parents up in Vermont and I'm training in the mountains, and I'll get up at 4 to go on a big run, come back, eat some lunch, and, maybe I'll do a mountain bike in the afternoon. Sometimes if I'm on a Cape, I'll, get up, the wind will be really good, and I'll go kite surfing in the morning and then come back. Maybe I'll do some work and, and then maybe go for a run in the afternoon. And, there's always a training plan and something to focus on. But I think the most important is I do my best to listen to my body and see how I'm feeling physically and mentally too. Do the things that are required, but do the things I want to do. As long as I'm getting enough sleep, I'm eating enough food, and I'm getting the proper training sessions in that I have on my schedule, where those fit in a daily schedule, maybe switched up from week to week, day to day. There's nothing special.
So is that also true for your diet and intake? It's just kind of like, I eat when I'm hungry, I drink when I'm thirsty, and I stay pretty healthy.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of research. I've tried to go vegan. I've done all these, tried the different diets and kind of pulled from here and there, and see what my body needs. But I mean, anybody who's in any type of endurance sport, like, your bodies just have cravings from time to time. Like, when you need to eat more food, when you need to drink water. And I try to put in the basis of good food, lots of vegetables and meat and water and fruit. But I keep a baseline of nutrition, and then after that, just make sure I eat enough.
So, man, you seem kind of type B to me. You know what I mean? You got these type A folks, real organized and analytical. They just pour into the efficiency of their day and schedule. And man, I can't get there personally. So it is just like kind of flowing with the day. And I almost feel like bad for it sometimes, because I feel like I'm, maybe I'm not utilizing this time better. But it's great to talk to someone else who's being, very impactful with more of that mindset.
Yeah. I mean, there's always, you try to regiment and schedule and stay organized, but you can only do that so much because, travel and life and family, and, you do as much as you can. But yeah, I'm not even sure where to, I think, I always it always ties back to my childhood of just kind of living, my brother and I say it, like, I don't know if this will come across the right way, but the way we grew up in Vermont was kind of lawless. Like, not in the sense we're breaking the law, but there was no, there was structure with sports, and our parents were great at disciplining us, but we could do what we want basically all the time because you grow up in the woods. There's no restraints of space. There's no restraints of what you should or shouldn't do because there's a neighbor that doesn't like you doing that in your backyard. We had the freedom to do what we wanted to, and I think that's what's kind of transitioned into, I guess, the way I approach life in general. It's just kind of take it day by day, and have sights on something. I mean, you always have to have goals and some sort of structure, but in the process, just kind of figure it out as you go along.
Hey man, I love that. So tell us a little bit about, before we jump into our rapid fire questions. It's like 5 or 6 questions at the end. Tell us a little bit about your recent FKT you did, your fastest known time of the Vermont 4000. Or is that, I mean, it seems like something you weren't able to do for a long time. Is that some sort of passion project you've always wanted to do, or what was that?
No, I won't lie to you. I only thought about it and found it, maybe 4 months ago. I always wanted to do these big adventures, and I just, I wasn't capable of doing it. And, with COVID, I had the time. And if people aren't familiar, FKT stands for fastest known time. There's a website, and there's all these runs or routes. And some of them are super competitive, like the Presidential Traverse, and some of them aren't. So, and you try to stick to the ones that are super competitive or are super aesthetic. Like, this was the guy, Peter Howe, put up the Vermont 4000ers, the one that we went after. He put up a really good time, but he was the only one to attempt it. So, like, the competition, hasn't been, the FKT hasn't gone back and forth between people for years. But it's a super aesthetic one. You're hitting the 4,000 plus foot peaks in Vermont. You're riding your bike down Route 100, which basically goes up the heart of Vermont. It's super scenic. And I was like, this would be a good challenge to kind of push my limits and discover, I guess, a new level of fitness. And I thought about doing it. And honestly, I don't think I would have gone through with it, except I told my buddy Aaron Newell, I was like, hey, like, I'm thinking of doing this. And he's like, hey man, like, I've been thinking of doing that for years. He's from the Glens Falls area in New York, and right near Vermont. And he's like, let's do it. I'm like, okay. And we put a date on the calendar. I'm like, I guess we're doing this. And it got to that date, and it happened to be like record high temperatures of
Gosh.
Yeah. And we're like, he's like, 2 days before, he's like, you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, screw it, like whatever, like it's not going to affect us that much. And it was spring, it was May 27th. How hot could it actually get in Vermont?
Right, right.
I don't care what they say on the weather report. It's like it's going to be fine. It ended up being like 93 degrees. I think Mount Mansfield had a record high that day in the middle of the day, like 95 or 98, like not spring record, like all-time high record. And that's just like, we had a blast on the adventure, but the biggest hurdle was absolutely the heat. The savior was there was still snow left on a lot of the tops of the mountains, and we were just taking it. We had towels that would wrap it in and put on our neck, underneath our hats. We would shove it in our shorts, put it on our armpits, because at like the midpoint at Sugar Bush Resort up at Mount Allen and Abe, that was kind of midday, and we were like looking back, we were trying to stay super positive through it all, but we were definitely flirting the line of heat stroke, both of us, and the snow was the absolute godsend that saved us.
Dang, man, that is, I mean, kudos for going after it despite the crazy weather. Do you foresee, doing more of these in your future? Because it's such a different experience than a Spartan race. There's no obstacles.
Yeah, so
there's no man-made obstacles. Let's put it that way.
No, but these FKTs, the routes are pretty technical, and there's lots of rocks up in the Northeast, at least. It's not just running; they're a blast. And a couple weeks later, Aaron dragged me on a FKT that he got. I didn't. I was slower than him on it, but he crushed it. It was called the Great Range in the Adirondacks, and it hits there's an area called the Great Range up out of the Keene Valley, I believe, and it's that's 23 miles and 10,000 feet of gain. And so that one's pretty epic. Like you literally have to have like some basic rock climbing poles to get up some of the mountains, and you're going down, and it's the Northeast, so you're in tree line most of the time. This isn't out in Colorado where you're running on these ridge lines opened up, just nice smooth trails. Like it is, you get some points, you got the pine trees coming in, you got like 12 inches of path you're looking through, you're bombing downhill, and all of a sudden there's a 7-foot drop off. Like it just keeps you on your toes. It's super lush. You're up high, you're down low in the streams running through. Most of the trails in the Northeast are they originally were like stream beds, and that's how people cut up through the thick brush to get to the summits of a mountain. So sometimes you're literally running down stream beds through water and whatnot, and it's not an obstacle course race. But when obstacle course races, when they originally started in 2012, 13, 14, they're more raw like this. There weren't the open groomed trails made for the masses to go through. It was super technical. It was super raw. It was, I guess go back to just kind of like Wallace. You just went out there. The course designers did not care, and they just made it brutal. And so these FKTs that we're kind of picking out while we have no racing, those are what are very attractive to us. Just super technical, super raw, and things that are just going to challenge you in ways, much more than just the endurance components.
No, man, I foresee a rise in these for the long haul. I think people are just going to do these FKTs out in the wilderness and realize, wow, I really like this. Maybe I should keep doing these too. And who knows, maybe it becomes more and more of a thing. It's already obviously decent size, but it's a just totally different challenge than something that's organized, in an event. But well, congratulations again for getting out there.
Well,
you're not kidding.
Man.
That terrain is rough.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's not bad out in Colorado. It's just nice, gradual. It's very, you know what I mean? It's kind of,
it's beautiful big, out there.
But it's not that bad. Like mountain biking even too. It's like the Northeast was some of the most miserable terrain I've ever been on.
Yeah.
It's so just choppy.
And that's what you say, Mason, like how miserable it is. And I think that's when you ask, like, how do I do these long things? How I've learned to push through this, like where I grew up and, where I train, it just kind of embodies that. Like that's every single day. You can say miserable, but to a point when you get used to that, that's the norm. And so when you're confronted with these hard things, it ends up being the norm, and you learn a passion to kind of enjoying that pain and suffering.
Absolutely. That type 2 fun, baby.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, let's move into rapid fire and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
This is like 5 or 6 questions. What's your favorite favorite success that you've had? Something that's most memorable to you?
Oh, shoot. Favorite success? I have no idea. I think getting to the point where I am in my life right now, finding who I am and finding something I love to do, and, just enjoying life every day. That probably has to be the best.
I mean, isn't that what this is all about? I mean,
Yeah.
what else can you get? Enjoy every day.
I think so. And, when you're in ball sports for so long, I think you get so wrapped up around, here and now, and just those individual compliments along the way, and you kind of forget about the big picture. So being where I'm at now, I'm pretty stoked.
Interesting. So this might also be interesting based on that. What are you most curious about right now outside of your career of coaching and in races?
Curious. I think curiosity for me expands into kind of pushing my limits with like adrenaline sports. So I kite surf, and finding out the limits to what I can or can't do in that, and how much adrenaline I can get pumping through my veins. I think when I'm not thinking about coaching and I'm not thinking about training for these races, that's what preoccupies my mind is, how far I can push myself in that. And that's kind of how I'm hardwired. Like my life is kind of revolved around trying to be the best at everything. And being the best for me is just kind of pushing my limit to like the absolute max. And I think that curiosity is really keeps me driven. And for me, with the kite surfing, it's just like anybody doesn't know about it. You got a harness around your waist with this big 10-meter kite up, 25 meters up into the wind, and harnessing Mother Nature is like it's a pretty ridiculous feeling. And to find out, how much of that, like how well you can control Mother Nature and harness as much power from it it doesn't get much better than that.
Oh man, exhilarating, humbling, I'm sure. Just all of the above. That's really cool. So, what would you say your biggest goal that you haven't achieved yet? What is your biggest goal you haven't achieved?
Well, I think for racing itself is to win a world championship. I think that's everybody's goal in this sport, and I'm finally to the point where I'm healthy enough to put in equivalent training to that of my competition. So I was super stoked about this year, and then now it got kind of interrupted. It's like I'm in a holding pattern to find out like if I can do it or if I can't do it. So I think that's my biggest goal at this point, is to kind of pursue that and see where it takes me along the way.
Awesome. So what is a health tip that you practice every day? Something you try to do every day?
Recently, it's like what I'm not the best at is just, breathing and relaxing, just kind of letting things go.
Perfect. I breathe every day too.
Yeah, man. It's like we forget like how important that process is. And I think, hopefully maybe through COVID, everybody's maybe learned that a little bit more, where, there's so many things out of control at this point that, there's no even reason to stress about it, because it's not really up to us at this point, whether or not we have a job, whether or not we can go out and, public or go to a restaurant, like it's not our call at this point, and just kind of have to enjoy the moment and relax and breathe and, and just enjoy what we can.
Good reminders, man. Absolutely. Good reminders with all this. So much out of our control. Well, we can't control our breathing and ourselves. So to wrap this all up, Ryan, what does it mean to you to live without compromise?
Oh, it's easy.
Good.
Living a life that you love, and something that you're passionate and have a lot of stoke about. And, you're not compromising anything. Every single day you're able to go out and, do what you want to do. And, I think that's the path to living without compromise. And it's a really awesome way to live life. Yeah, man, that is when I got into started drinking athletic brewing and stuff, I thought I was one in a million. And to find out over the next 2 years that like, no, like there's a huge community that is trying to live this lifestyle and, you know, drink these beers. Like it was really cool to kind of go along with the process and, you know, become part of this community that is, everybody's doing really cool things and have a really cool approach to life. So it's been a blast.
Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, for being part of the Athletic Brewing family. You know, we're happy to have you. We love seeing your accomplishments and what you do. And so, yeah, thanks for being on Without Compromise.
Thanks, Mason. Appreciate it.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to growing the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.